Hi, everybody. Since we aren't going to be able to meet in class on Wednesday, I wanted to make sure I took some time to talk a little bit about the architecture and the architectural sculpture that was the assignment for that day. We'll have time to follow up in class on Friday if you have any particular questions. So, a couple of things as we move into this discussion of architecture and architectural sculpture. Um, One is that a lot of the works we're going to be looking at come from that period that we've been referring to as the classical age of Athens. This period where money was flowing into Athens because of its kind of oversight of the Delian League, and ultimately the fact that it essentially plundered the treasury of the Delian League. And all of this is being rebuilt in the wake of the Persian Wars. So in the wake of the destruction of Athens during the Persian Wars. So a lot of these pieces that we're going to be seeing are rebuilds that not only sort of point to the past of Athens and of Greek history, but also kind of demonstrate the glorious moment that Athens saw itself experiencing there in the 5th century. So another thing that is not in um, your art slides per se, but I wanted to make sure we talked about are the orders of Greek architecture. So sometime in the 6th and early 5th centuries, the orders of architecture were developed. And for our purposes right now, there are two major orders that you want to know about. By order, we just mean sort of style or approach to architecture. The two main ones that we want to know about right now are the two on the left here, the Doric order and the Ionic order. So a couple of things about these. If I were to ask you, for example, what would be the most distinctive quality that distinguishes the Doric from the Ionic order? Some of you may know, but the first thing you would look at would be the columns. So if you look at these columns here in the Doric and Ionic order, you'll see a couple of differences. In the Doric order, the one here on the left, you'll see that the column rests directly on the step. There's no base to the Doric order. Whereas if you look at the Ionic order, you see this more decorative base at the bottom of the column, between the column itself and the step. Another place you might look, and probably the first place you would look even before looking at the base, is at the top of the column or the capital. One of the things you'll notice is that at the capital of the column or the top of the column in the Doric order, you have a very simple capital. You have a very simple construction there at the top. Whereas in the Ionic order, you have this more ornate scrolled capital at the top of the column. You'll also notice if you look at the Corinthian order that it gets even more ornate as time goes on. We'll look more at the Corinthian order in coming weeks. But you have this scroll at the top called a volute, which distinguishes the the Ionic column from the Doric column. You may also notice some other things about the columns. For example, the ones in the Ionic order are thinner. There are more flutes, more of these ridges going down the column than you see in the Doric order. So it gives it more of an intricate feel. Another thing that you might notice about these orders is what's above the columns. You have the pediment, which is here at the top of the Ionic order. The pediment is this triangular piece at the top where you'll often see sculptures or other things. We're going to see some examples of this as we look through the slides. But another thing you may notice is the decoration just under the pediment. So over here in the Doric order, you have metopes, which are these panels, sort of smaller square-shaped panels in which sometimes they would be blank, but often there would be a sculpture there. We're going to see some example of that. And these metopes are broken up by triglyphs. Whereas in the Ionic order, you would often have, rather than the triglyphs and the metopes, you would often have an Ionic frieze. A frieze is a more continuous panel in which maybe a story is told, or something is depicted in a more continuous way. You can kind of think of this almost as like a border of wallpaper that people used to often have in their house, where it's continuous, kind of going along the top of the wall. So these are just a few examples of differences between the Doric and Ionic order that you want to keep in mind as we look at some of these architectural features of classical age of Athens. So the first one we want to look at, and this is probably the most famous of all architectural works in Athens, this is the Parthenon. The Parthenon is the crown jewel of the Acropolis. In fact, one architectural historian has said that the Acropolis is the crown jewel of Athens. It's the hill on which all of these magnificent structures stand, and at the center of that is the Parthenon. And so this is really kind of the achievement par excellence of Athenian architecture. You'll notice a few things about the Parthenon. For one, you'll notice that time has not been kind to the Parthenon. Most of the structure, much of the structure has worn away. Many of the architectural sculptures are no longer there. If you want to see them, you'll find a lot of them in the British Museum. But what is there does point to some of the grandeur of this building. So you'll notice the columns there. They are of the Doric order. The columns are a little bit thicker. They rest directly on the stair, and they have the less ornate capital. You'll also notice here at the top, above the capitals, you'll see the triglyphs and the metopes. And we're going to get a closer up look at one of those metopes in just a moment. And I'll talk a little bit about what's depicted on those. The pediment, which we'll also look at on a separate slide, is missing. You can find it and the sculptures contained therein, again, in London at the British Museum. Another thing to know about the Parthenon is that it was symmetrical. The proportions were equal. This was very important to the architects to reflect this sense of balance and order. And again, the Parthenon is the center of religious life for Athens. It is a temple to Athena. It is a structure built in honor of the goddess Athena, the patron goddess of Athens. And so because of that, within the Parthenon, this is what you would find in the center room. You would find this intimidating, imposing, magnificent statue of Athena herself. Now, this is obviously not the original. The original has been lost to us. We have descriptions of it. We have drawings of it. And we have this copy based on those descriptions, based on those drawings, that comes to us from our home state of Tennessee in Nashville. Some of you may know that in Nashville, there is a replica of the Parthenon, so that if you want to see what the Parthenon would have looked like in its glory, both in terms of being structurally intact, in terms of the sculptures being painted. We're used to kind of seeing everything as being white because it's been bleached by the sun, but most of the sculptures would have been painted and colorful. And then they've restored this statue, or not restored this statue, replicated this statue, so that you can go to Nashville, you can step into this room and you can see this statue just towering over you. It was magnificent to Athenians who would have walked in there and seen it in person. It would have been a fitting tribute to their patron goddess. And in fact, the Parthenon was the site, the culminating site of the Pan-Athenaic procession, which is where the entire population of Athens would or many of the people in Athens would march up the Acropolis together. People of all classes, people of all walks of life would march up the hill together and present this statue of Athena with an offering. This was a significant event in the life of the people of Athens. And so the Parthenon is often said to be the crown jewel of the Acropolis, and this statue is often thought to be the crown jewel of the Parthenon itself. This is not the only example of art associated with the Parthenon that we'll look at. I'll go ahead and skim forward to a couple other, and we'll scoot back to those in just a minute. So this is one of the metopes. This is a lapith and centaur. Again, this is found in London in the British Museum. You can go see this up close. You can get close enough to these things. If you go, you can get close enough to these things to touch them. You're not supposed to touch them, but you can be that close, looking, directly at these works, which is incredible. Now, obviously, this one has also been weathered by time. The heads of the creatures are missing, but you get a sense of what's going on here. This is the Lapiths, a human race fighting against a centaur. A centaur, as you might know, is a half man, half horse. And each of the four sides of the Parthenon depict different battles. You have this one, the Lapiths versus the centaurs. You have the Greeks versus the Amazons. You have the Titans versus the Olympians, and you have the battle against the giants. And in each of these four sculptural programs, essentially the message is the battle of humanity against that which is not human, or the battle of the gods of Greece against other gods, or the battle of human beings against giants, or in the case of the Greeks versus the Amazons, the battle of Greeks versus their foreign enemies. So this is meant to point and to remember the victory over the Persians, for example. So these sculptures are not just for aesthetic value. They had a message, and the message was that Greece, and in particular Athens, was the best of humanity. Dr. Blackburn in his lecture mentioned that term anthropocentrism. The sculptural program of the Parthenon, of these metopes, is a very anthropocentric program. The idea is the elevation of humanity over everything else. And here, the battle of the Lapiths versus the centaurs demonstrates that. It's as though humanity is at war with our more bestial, our more animalistic impulses, and is triumphing over them. So in addition to sort of the message, you can also see some of the techniques that we've talked about already, the realism, the naturalism, the movement, the drama. All of these things that we talked about in classical sculpture are present here in this relief sculpture on the Parthenon. This is the famous statue of the three goddesses that we would see if the pediment was intact, if that triangular space at the top of the Parthenon was still intact. These three goddesses were housed within that triangle. And you have Hestia, who's the goddess of hearth and home, Dione, who is a Titan, and then her daughter Aphrodite, all in various positions of reclining and sitting together. And what's most remarkable about this, again, time has not been kind to this statue. And also, again, this is preserved in the British Museum in London. Obviously, we don't see their heads, but one of the things that I think is most remarkable, I want to draw your attention to, is the lifelikeness, the naturalness, not just of the postures, but of the clothing here, the gowns. The folds of these goddesses' gowns seem to be real. To be able to achieve this in marble is incredible. I think, as I mentioned in class on Monday, prior to Michelangelo, we don't see much of this. We don't see much of this ability to work in marble in this way. And yet these artists, these sculptors, seem to have brought such life, such naturalism to this statue. A couple of other pieces that we want to look at. So the Temple of Athena Nike. This is a much smaller piece of architecture on the Acropolis, but it is a work of architecture devoted to Athena of victory, right? So the Athena that helps them win victory over their enemies. And again, just wanted to draw your attention to a few features of this. You have here the Ionic column. You can see the more elaborate capital, the base connecting the column to the step, and then the scrolled capital that you see there. And then there's a frieze. You can see above the columns, you can see that continuous that continuous sculptural program there, not broken up into panels, but simply proceeding from left to right in a continuous process. And then finally, apologize, the Erechtheum. And the Erechtheum is another rebuild along with the statue to Athena, the Parthenon. This is another rebuild after the Persian Wars, built on the site of a shrine to a former king, Erechtheus. And there are a number of things that are remarkable about this. One, it's a multi-leveled, complex structure. So rather than just the pure symmetry that we saw in the Parthenon, this one's a little bit more complex. Note you have the Ionic columns here, but also in addition to columns, you have what are called pilasters, Pilasters, which are sort of fake columns. These columns here are not necessarily holding up anything. They're not necessarily bearing the load. These ones to the far left, in fact, it's the wall that's bearing the load here, and the column is not really supporting anything. It's there more for decoration. Even more remarkable in the sense of columns are these columns over here to the right, upholding the smaller roof. You may be able to notice they're in the shape of women, of maidens. These are called caryatids. This is a term that's on your study guide, Caryatid. It's essentially a column that is in the shape of a human being, in the shape of a woman, holding up the roof there. So these are load bearing, but also decorative. One of the amazing things about the Erechtheum, I got to go there for the first time this past summer and learn some of this. You see this olive tree down here. This speaks to a legend. There was a contest, and I may have mentioned this already. There was a contest between the gods. Just like the humans in the Greek world, the gods were always in competition with one another. And as may not surprise you, having read the Odyssey, this competition was between Athena and Poseidon. And the contest was who was going to win the allegiance of Athens, who was going to be the patron god or goddess of the city of Athens. And so they both offered what they had to give. Poseidon said, I will give you all good things from the sea, salt water and fish and the ability to sail and everything associated with the sea. And Athena offered olive oil. She offered the olive tree. And as you know, the olive tree becomes the primary crop for which Athens is known. And she is said, according to the legend, to have planted a tree there in Athens. Now, this is not the tree, but the legend has it that this is the site of the tree that Athena planted there in Athens. And so this tree here was planted about a century ago in commemoration of that event. And it's a popular attraction there on the Acropolis. So the amazing thing about this architecture that we see, all this stuff that was built in the wake of the Persian Wars, is that it's not just functional. It's not just about building a space, although it certainly is about that, or creating a place where people can gather, although it certainly is about that. It's also about telling a story. And so whether it's telling the story of the gift that Athena gave to the Athenians, whether it's telling the story of human beings' triumph over their enemies, or the Greeks' triumph over their enemies, or just recounting the tales from the myths and the legends on which Athens was built, you see in the sculptures, in this architecture, you see the ability to craft a narrative. And it's a narrative in stone. It's a narrative that as people would walk up the Acropolis, they would see. Even today, the visitors to Athens will see this as well. And it's really the legacy of that classical age of Athens, that you can walk among these buildings, you can be transported to the past, and you can see the same things that our Greek ancestors saw, and that the ways that they engaged with the world around them. So thank you for your attention. We will follow up more with the conversation on Friday, but I hope this video is helpful.